1935, the Lions win the NFL championship. The Detroit Tigers take the World Series. The Red Wings bring home Lord Stanley's Cup. Joe Louis begins his rise to world domination. This transforms the Motor City into Detroit, City of Champions.
Crack of the bat. We do need a gun sound effect.
We do.
We needed a starter pistol. We need a rifle, a shotgun blast.
Yeah. Well, that would take it, but that would require doing an extra
Work.
10, 20 seconds of work before the
more
show.
than 10, 20 seconds.
Oh,
yeah.
is it okay?
Yeah.
I'm downgrade. I'm not giving you enough credit for the time it takes to do something like that.
Oh, reminds me, we did
diminishing the effort.
A Man Cave Happy Hour. Last night we did Verner's, mixing it up with Verner's.
Oh, did you? Cool.
And so we created a Man Cave Happy Hour cocktail with Verner's.
Oh, cool.
So it was
I love Verner's with liquor, man.
It's the Man Cave Happy Hour double barrel Motor City cocktail.
Nice. Verner's and whiskey. It's like one of my favorite things.
Yeah, so because it's the Verner's it has to do with a barrel, and so does the whiskey.
Yeah.
And so we a little cherry bitters, and then 2 or 3 Luxardo cherries and a little dip of the Luxardo in there.
How much of the Verner's you put in?
Good stuff. It's like 2 to 1 to the bourbon. Right.
So it's a flat out. It's a straight up drink.
It's a cocktail.
Cocktail. Okay.
It's a cocktail. Yeah. So it's good stuff.
Hell yeah,
it was
man.
A double barrel shotgun.
Yeah. Is that what you're calling it?
No, it's a double barrel Motor City cocktail.
Oh, you just threw the last bit in for effect because we're talking about guns today.
Because we get into shotguns.
Heck yeah, we
today
do.
As we continue.
This is Firearms, man. We're
it's
talking
all kinds of firearms
today.
And it's Detroit City of Champions, the podcast. I'm Jamie Flanagan.
Charles Avison.
And there you go. Introduce ourselves. Might as well do that. And we're going to take a second. Everybody just kind of shout out your name. Just kind of, oh, hey, hi.
Type it in. So we can't really hear it, so you might as well type it in. And while you're at it, hit the thumbs up button.
That's it. Like, subscribe, leave a comment, do all the podcast things in all the podcast places. We would genuinely appreciate it. And you get some cool, I was going to say Man Cave Happy Hour. You get Man Cave Happy Hour swag. You can get City of Champions swag at the wearingfunny.com. And, of course, at DetroitCityOfChampions.com. You can pick it up there as well. So all kinds of stuff to get your hands on. You get the books.
Yeah,
the books are available. Just going through these stories, it's just I just love.
It's every sport
leaping through.
Yeah, and there's it's the stories, and then I love the deeper dives into the different subjects and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We go off on a little bit of tangents, but we only go off on tangents for cool stuff. I think stuff that's interesting. We don't just go off on tangents for no reason.
Well, I do, but
I might do a little bit, but I think that they're actually kind of they're interesting enough.
My favorite superhero, Tangent Man.
Is it? I like Captain Obvious.
Captain Obvious.
That's my favorite.
Captain Obvious is good. Captain Obvious is good. But, all right, like you said, Firearms. And I was kind of calling you. I called you out a little bit. Because
you try to be like, oh, what? There's like 4 random guys or something. You're going to try to get 4 out of it.
Because we Detroit City Champions, the whole story, it's like the 3 majors.
33 minors.
The Lions, Red Wings, and Tigers, and then 30 other minor.
Yeah.
No,
they call him minor, but Gar Wood's barely minor. He had the most coveted trophy in the world.
The World Cup.
The Harmsworth.
Oh, Gar Wood, yeah. And then Walter Hagen, the Ryder Cup in golf, the Ryder Cup Challenge. They won. Those are no.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We call them minor only because we're like, a lot of times they refer to baseball, football, hockey as major championships. Just because they're major sports,
right?
And that's kind of what we mean as the major sports. But
sure.
All these people we're talking about were the peak professional. The peak of every sport that they're in. And a lot of times people will say like, well, how is there 33 championships even to be won?
Right.
And it's like, well, here we go. We're walking through it, and you were making fun of me a little bit last week. Like,
out of these 33,
5 championships we're going to combine. I'm like, yeah.
Because there's the one picture we had up last week, and we were talking about, and it had like the 5. We had it on tap for.
And
this
so
week.
you were saying like, oh, what you're going to count all 5 of those guys as one championship, and I'm like,
it's
because they each won individuals, and they also won the team sport.
So
too.
They won a team one. I had this picture up, and I was calling you to task on it. And
it's
so,
not even me that's laying claim to it. I'm going off of the claims that they made in their day, and we're going to read the article that he lays claim to that title and to those 5, and he actually says specifically. We're going to get to it here in a second. He says specifically, he says there's 5 championships, and we're going to list them up. That's what he says. I mean, that's why I was like, okay, well, if he's counting them as 5, I'm going to as well. So
right. But again, I was just calling. I'm like, so
yeah. So he said he's like
because in the book is labeled. You have it labeled as champions. No, on the page there, champions.
Because we go through and number them, and so I started at 1 outside of the 3 majors.
Right.
So Garwood was number 1,
and we're kind of at this point we're following the book sequentially, just because why not?
Yeah. And so this is number.
Otherwise, we'll get confused and forget somebody.
Yeah. So Clark Haskins was number 5,
right,
which equates to 8 that we've covered. Joe Louis in addition to that would be 9 because Joe Louis didn't win his championship in 35. And he's the biggest star in the world, but he's the one guy that didn't win his championship, as we've talked about.
Yeah. We only gave him 13 episodes?
Yeah, no, we barely scratched the surface with Joe. So Clark Haskins was number 5, and then we have today we're doing 6 through 10.
And that's how I was like, and I'm like, oh,
you're like, because there's 5 guys in a row. And you're like, well, why didn't you count the Tigers as like 30 champions? Because they all won. Well, it's not like that. They each won their own championship, and then the team itself won one.
So actually, it might even be 34 because each of these 5 won individuals, and then.
Here's the thing: is that picture that we were looking at? That picture was from 1937, and so that's not the actual. I showed that picture.
It's a reasonable facsimile.
It's a reasonable facsimile, and one of the guys, which is Alfred Hemming, was in that shot as well.
Is this in the book, or is this a different one?
What's that?
Oh no, that's
in the
book.
Sharing?
Okay.
Yeah. I have that in the book.
Okay.
And so is Alfred Hemming. That's in the top left corner of the picture here.
All right.
And so Alfred Hemming's also. Alfred Hemming is the second from. He is the second from left. No, he's the third from left in the picture. He's right in the center. He's a guy in the center.
But
he was a big name guy, and outside of this, I was like kind of looking up some of these guys' names before the show today, and dude, he was winning pistol shooting championships like all the way through like till he was like 50 something. He's like in his 50s and through the 1950s and 60s, a guy was winning shooting contests. Like I'm not talking about random things. These are national. Firearms. I mean, these are major. These are major things.
Okay.
Man. So
before we move on, though, I just want to mention it's like 1935, and again, all of this happened
in 35. Yeah.
In 1935.
Yeah.
And we kind of want to tip our hats for a second to the 2 Detroit police officers who lost their lives in 1935. If you want to hear all about those guys, that was back in episode 90. So you can jump back to episode 90 when we talked about Clark Haskins and his weightlifting. He was a Detroit police officer as well, but he's a weightlifting champion. But today we're talking about firearms and the Detroit police sharpshooters individually and collectively. What do we got going on?
So I just want to read the article because these, like, honestly, there's nothing on these guys. I mean, Alfred Hemming, actually, there was quite a few things on him.
Yeah.
But it's mainly talking about all the different championships in that he won. You know what I mean? Like, so, like the NRA, like National Rifle Association, those are the championships that these guys are winning. And the National Rifle Association is having these shooting contests and championships back then.
Right.
And his name is listed on all these things. So that's when they're talking about with like national championships and that. So
all right. So what do we got cooking about?
All right.
Guys?
So I'm just gonna read an article. This is the article that Bud Shaver wrote in the Detroit Times on January 27th, 1936. So. So he's talking about, I mean, once again, City of Champions stories, and he's listing these names. So I'm just going to let Bud Shaver tell the story. That's how I wrote these books. It's like, I mean, I didn't know anything about these people. He did. He's right there. So why not let him tell the story?
You know what? You got to put your Bud Shaver costume on next time.
I don't even know what that looks like. I do have a couple pictures of him. I think there is a picture of him wearing one of those Fez type caps for some kind of a celebration. So that might be a Bud Shaver look.
You got to get the Shriner Fezes.
Yeah, if you look in the second book, I'm pretty sure I have a picture of him wearing a Fez at because he always did he was always the MC at events. Bud Shaver did the MC. He was the MC at Champions Day.
Oh, was he?
Yeah, he's the editor of the Detroit Times.
And it was where was it?
Sports editor of the Detroit Times.
Where was that held?
The Masonic
The
Temple.
Masonic
Yeah,
Temple.
yeah.
So he's wearing a fez. That's he's
there you go.
probably,
Yeah, Mason. That.
Yep.
So he. I don't know if that picture was the picture I have of him wearing the fez was at the Champions Day.
No, but I'm just saying he's involved in that. He probably has a fez. Yeah.
Bud Shaver's a big. At this time,
I
whenever
want a
Bud
fez,
Shaver,
for crying out loud.
of all the different writers we have, I know we talk about like Bob Murphy. Bob Murphy was fantastic, but Bud Shaver, whenever Bud Shaver starts to write, I mean, he's the sports editor of the paper, so it's like when you see an article or hear an article from Bud Shaver, they got
his fingers is hitting the keys, something's
it's
up.
the big dog. Yeah,
Yep.
he's the big dog writing. So,
All right.
So here's a Bud Shaver article here. So, again, January 27th, 1936, out of the Detroit Times. So he says, it seems that while we have been trumpeting about such world champions as the Tigers and Lions and such near champions as Joe Louis and the Red Wings, and I'd say this is my own segment, i.e. the Red Wings had not yet won the Stanley Cup when this article was written, we have overlooked a lot of smaller fry who deserve a toot or two. Hold on, he says.
I could use a toot or two right about now, too.
He says a toot or two, too.
Toot or two,
So
two.
he says, it's so, okay, so I gotta,
If you're tooting your horn.
but as far as like also, a toot or two also.
Right,
so
right.
a toot or two, too. So, okay, I'm going to go back and read that again because that caught me off guard. It's a tongue twister. So it seems that while we have been trumpeting about such world champions as the Tigers and Lions and such near champions as Joe Louis and the Red Wings, we have overlooked a lot of smaller fry who deserve a toot or two. Say that fast and then set it to music. That's him saying it. That's him saying it.
Hey, toot, toot, tootsie, goodbye.
Say a toot or
That's
two.
that was
Say that.
probably a song popular around that
So
time.
he identifies that as like I just said something like a crazy tongue twister. He says, say that fast and then set it to music. That's the personality of the papers back then. So anyways, so he continues. Mr. Thomas V. Holton, 1211 Fairview Avenue, took us up pretty sharply on this point, and rather than have trouble with Mr. Holton, who seems a grim, determined person, we dedicate a portion of the space today to acquainting you with at least 5 national champions who hail from Detroit and environs. All of them are good shots, in fact, the best, which is a mighty handy accomplishment to have these days if you are going hunting or just around the corner for a bottle of milk. As Mr. Holton points out, shooting the pupil out of a bullseye or the pip out of the ace of spades is no sissy sport. Champions in that art have to be in just as fine physical condition as a baseball, football, or hockey player, a tennis star, or a golf champion. To quote Mr. Holton, they must have eyesight which is probably superior to that of 90% of all other athletes in the world, mental temperaments with no more nerves than the Statue of Liberty. In other words, concludes Mr. Holton enthusiastically, they must be able to take it, which is a new thought in target shooting. I always thought it was the target which took it, but live and learn. So Officer Alfred W. Hemming, Detroit Police Department, is the first of the 5 forgotten champions who Mr. Holton trots out for our pop-eyed inspection. Officer Hemming is the National Police pistol champion, having won this enviable distinction at Camp Perry last September. Officer Hemming is not a total stranger. We remember seeing his fat chops above a police collar in a picture before. Set a national match record and came within 1 point of equaling the world record by scoring 288 points out of a possible 300. Didn't he, Mr. Holton? Yes, sir. It is a dumb lawbreaker who chooses Officer Hemming for a pistol duel and expects to depart the scene without carrying away a lot of lead. Then there is Trooper Carlos Hurley of the Michigan State Police, who happens to be a national revolver champion. Trooper Hurley also won his title at Camp Perry, plugging a score of 285 out of possible 300. Lieutenant Jay Borma, Michigan National Guard, Owasso, Michigan, is the national individual pistol champion, 45 automatic class, United States government match. The lieutenant won his championship at Camp Perry while shooting against a field of 1,500 of the finest pistol shots in the country, including the best the Army, Navy, and Marine Corps could muster. That is no mean feat because the members of the latter service do little else except burn up ammunition in target practice. Champion number 4 is the Detroit Police Pistol Team, which won the National Police Team Pistol Championship against the best teams that Los Angeles, New York, and several other large cities could muster. It is gratifying to know that we are protected with some of the best trigger men in the world. Like, these guys are elite. These are elite pistol shooters, dude. These are Detroit police pistol shooting
So
team.
there are NRA awards, there's police competitions, and because he said, I like how he said at the beginning, at least 5.
Yeah, there's probably more than that.
He said, if you're racking these up, there's at least 5. And it's interesting how he says these forgotten champions.
They are forgotten.
And he wrote this in 35.
Yeah, they were forgotten then. They're certainly going to be forgotten now. You know,
it's because trying to dig, and I applaud you, Charles, for finding these articles and these stories. I mean, because he was noting how they were forgotten then.
Yeah.
They were just lost, forgotten, buried like an Egyptian.
Well, he says it
tomb.
right out. Well, he's saying it out. He's saying it like we spend so much ink on the tigers and lions and
right.
focusing and at the time. What's interesting is he hadn't even had the Red Wings at that point.
Right.
The Red Wings hadn't won yet.
Yeah, he said the near champions.
Yeah. And so
Red Wings.
Yeah. And so the Red Wings haven't even clinched it yet. They're 3 months away. That was in April that they won. So he's sitting there like actually about 2 months because they won April 7th. So this is the January 26th. So it's about February, March, and then so about 2.5 months. So anyways, but the thing about it is that when I was putting these books together, I wasn't trying to like conjure up championships. I'm going where the data leads.
Sure.
And so when you see what I'm saying, it's like when you're filtering out the articles and you're seeing articles and photos and stuff about the Detroit police, and then you get to the point where you're writing about them and you're sitting there looking at it, and he's saying to me, Charles, as I'm writing,
include this in your book.
We got 5 guys here, and he counts them as 5 championships. And if I only included the team as 1. Then I would be doing a disservice to the research where he specifically says of 5 championships in this year that we are counting among the number.
Yep.
And so I would be doing it like if I was reading this instead, I was like, well, number 6 is the Detroit Police pistol shooting team. And I read that article where he says we have 5 forgotten champions.
It's like,
then you'd be like, Charles, shouldn't you count that as 5?
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's what I'm saying. Is that
I would call you out on that too.
Exactly. It would be the opposite, except for it would be I'm not staying true to what what the information presents. So that's what I'm saying. So it was like Bud Shaver, the editor of the sports editor of the Detroit Times, says there's 5 champions, and and there's his information. So anyways, so there's 4 anyways. There's 4 certainly. There's a 5th.
Yep.
There's a 5th that we're going to talk. I'm going to conclude the article here.
Oh yeah.
We show the pictures up there just to mention up here.
All right. What this is this the one you want?
Well, that was the first picture that shows Alfred Hemming, and then these 5 guys. One of the Alfred Hemming's in the middle of this. That picture is from the 1930. It's from 1938 Detroit Police pistol shooting team, which also were winning championships. And that they were always good. They had like a roster of just great shooters that always were coming into the department. And so, anyways, so it just kind of shows, that's what they actually. What's cool is about that picture is that as the guy on the far left isn't wearing the blue uniform, he's a detective.
Oh, okay.
And so he's got like the gumshoe look, whatever.
Yeah.
He's got the flat, the actual bowler hat, and that guy is straight out of a. Like the James Cagney guy looks like he looks like James Cagney, man.
I know some of that stuff in the article there, though. From like today's perspective is kind of like not absolutely politically correct. People would cringe at it. I love it every second of that article. But he's like, oh, somebody wants to face off with him. He's going to leave in with a lot of lead. And it's like you want to play down.
Well, he's not
police use of force.
Yeah, but he's sitting there. He goes, yes, sir. It is a dumb lawbreaker who chooses Officer Hemming for a pistol duel and expects to depart the scene. Like, no doubt, that's an obvious But could you imagine you're like getting a shootout with Alfred Hemming? That guy was a fucking marksman, dude. You're gone. You're smoked. And then he finishes up with he says, it is gratifying to know that we are protected with some of the best trigger men in the world. And he is not wrong. He's stating the obvious.
I know. But just police use of force is portrayed differently in the media today.
Well, yeah, it sure is.
But I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, don't screw around.
Yeah, he's like, you got the Detroit Police winning championships. They're the best shooters in the world.
Don't screw around. It's not going to end
America,
well.
America's got a gun culture, and the culture of the law enforcement in Detroit are the elite shooters of the country. So he's, he's proud of that. It really is something we should be proud of. If you got guys, and that's the thing is that when it comes to the police and, shootings and all these different things, like, would you rather have a bunch of guys who don't know how to shoot and that don't shoot and are just randomly daily just picking up a gun because they just have it on them? Like, these guys are professional shooters, man.
Yep.
Like, they to me, it's like, training is how you create elite police force. And if anything, if any kind of issue, I'm not trying to dive too deep into politics, but if there's a resolution to any police officer issues in today's day, it wouldn't be to take away money from the police to have the whoever you can find, cobble together. It's to have the elite of the elite, the creme de la creme, like these guys. You have the creme de la creme. You take you have the you don't spend less on your police force.
Oh my gosh!
Imagine if the Detroit Police Department could offer salaries of $1 million, just as a sample, an example.
Yep.
You got paid $1 million for being a cop in Detroit, right? $1 million. What kind of talent would that draw? You would get the creme de la creme.
Sure.
You would get these elite special forces, Navy SEAL types, because they'd be like, hell, I'm going for $1 million.
Hondo.
Because you'd only have X amount of slots you'd be able to fill.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So it would attract the highest caliber of talent. And then what you do is that you drill and train and train and train.
Mm-hmm,
and so what I'm saying is that
you train so you don't have to.
Yeah, exactly. Or so that you are precision marksman. And I'm not trying to say anything about the Detroit police. I actually think, I live in Detroit. My experience with them is, well, I had some rough early stuff, but what I'm saying, I'm not trying to say anything.
I grew up in the city.
I live there now. I'm not trying to say anything, actually. What I'm saying is that the answer is not to take away money. The answer is seen, as another example of this story, which is that, like, he's saying it right here. It is gratifying we joke about that. It is gratifying that we are protected with some of the best trigger men in the world. He's happy with that fact. They're best trigger men in the world. Why wouldn't you be happy with that? And so,
I love
it's a lesson to, it's a reason to mention.
I'm just saying, in the media today wouldn't quite write that. I love that it's in there.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of stuff they wouldn't write. There's
I know.
A bunch of bullshit.
And I applaud our author there for saying that way, and I applaud you for putting it in there. And because I said
that's a proud thing, man.
These
you
are
got the City of Champions, and amongst the champions is the finest pistol shooting men in the world, and at least in America. Who's better than them in the world? What other shooters around the world are taking on are going to beat out American shooters at this time?
I wonder if they got an invite to the Champions Day celebration.
I would like to find that out myself.
I'm really curious.
Well, maybe they were guarding it. Maybe they were there. Some of these guys were there.
I'm curious who was on the champion invitee.
That would be amazing to see. I mean, there was a ton
that day.
I mean,
because it's billed as the largest gathering of champions.
Yeah, they were. They may have very well been, especially if Bud Shaver's writing about them. At the very least, they're getting an invite to come in.
And this was before it.
I wouldn't be surprised if they were. I would not be surprised if they were there. They weren't shown in the Champions Day newspaper,
right?
But it doesn't mean that they weren't there. And the thing about it is,
so everybody in the Champions Day newspaper, because the Champions Day celebration, one of the papers was behind that, or one of the radio
Detroit
stations.
Times.
The Times was behind that.
Well, the Times threw the party at Champions Day. They sponsored the party,
and they had the special edition.
They came out with the special edition newspaper, and Bud Shaver was the MC of the party.
Yeah,
and that's why the Champions Day never got mentioned in the Free Press or News. Because the news and Free Press hated the Times.
Sure.
They didn't want to help sell tickets for the Times event.
Sure.
So they didn't even mention it. So what they did was the Detroit
after the fact.
The Detroit News mentioned it after the fact in a little blurb.
Yeah. And
then the Detroit Free Press, of course, did that beautiful Champions Day newspaper.
Yeah.
And they issued that on April 19th, 1936. So that came out on the Sunday after that Champions Day, April 18th, Saturday.
That one?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so
people watching the video, it's a pretty cool spread. We brought it up
spread
several times.
It's my favorite spread.
It's easily Googleable.
Yeah.
And you would call this what if someone was trying to Google this?
The City of Champions newspaper.
City of Champions.
And so
newspaper.
as what's differentiated, so there's two really major significant newspapers of this year.
Yeah.
The one you have on screen where it shows 21 of the 33 championships, and Joe Louis is not included in that number because he didn't win the championship.
Yeah, but he's on there.
So if you did include him, there would show 22 of the 22 champions if you counted Joe Louis. But so there's 21 champions plus Joe Louis on this newspaper. And so I call this the City of Champions newspaper. It actually says on the newspaper, City of Champions.
Yep.
And so then the other one is the Champions Day newspaper, which was specifically the newspaper. We don't have an image of that. I can get you one. But the Champions Day newspaper is the newspaper that was specifically issued at Champions Day itself.
Yeah, I'm curious. I'm curious what the roster was for the invitees.
I am too.
Because and again, these guys and these like smaller or minor ones, as we're calling them, they're still major achievements.
Especially if they got if Bud Shaver's writing about them in the Times, why wouldn't he say, "Hey, bring the police guys"?
Let's talk about these 5.
Yeah.
All right, so those were 4 of them.
Yeah.
And then,
so
but
there's a 5th.
Is this the same article? Is he continuing or different?
Yeah, because he says right here of the 4 of the 5.
Okay.
And so there's a 5th that it's but this one's not so forgotten because this is on the Champions Day newspaper.
Oh, right.
I'm sorry, this is on the City of Champions newspaper.
All right, is this Henry?
So he is, Henry B. Joy. He's marked amongst the 21. He's shown on the newspaper, and this image we're showing on screen is an isolated image from that newspaper.
Okay.
So, he's on there.
Is Joy Road named after him?
Yeah, it's after his dad. His dad was the Packard. I think he was the founder of Packard.
Oh, right on. Okay.
Yeah, and I've got. Here's the thing: is I hate to say I think he was this. I think he was that. We're actually going to read his obituary because there's not a lot of information on him.
Sure.
And so I found his obituary, and it talks about his dad and stuff like this.
Well,
so
and that's what I was going to say. Telling this story, and these guys, they're lost. It's like you're an archaeologist unearthing these things. I mean, they're so lost, like ancient Egyptian treasures, and you have to like brush away the dust.
Yeah.
Just thousands and thousands and millions upon billions of grains of sand to get to this story, and I applaud you for having
appreciate that.
gone through the miles and miles of microfiche.
Yeah,
I would be curious how many miles of microfiche.
It was years.
You searched.
I was sat in that library for years.
It was like 5 or 7 years, right?
Well, it was an evolution. The first, initially it was a 2-page paper, which didn't take very much time.
Yeah.
But then there was the 30-page thesis was the longest paper I'd ever written, and that was like 3 months. Just
you're not doing a lot of imagery with that. You were just pulling the information.
Yeah, it was like going through microfilm and stuff like that because there was no books.
Yeah,
there's nothing on the internet. There's no books, so there's literally no boundary.
Kids today don't understand what going to a library and searching things was like.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't know either.
They got the world at their fingertips.
But the thing is, I didn't know either, to be quite honest, because every paper I'd ever written, there was always a book. There was always something. I mean, the internet was like it was 2005, so the internet was in its infancy, but we still had like a like a computer lab with the internet. I could print stuff off, like off the internet or whatever.
Yeah,
and so I had access to like, the whole inventory of Detroit news and Free Press articles that were online.
Sure. Yeah.
And so that's what I was like, there's no books, there's nothing on the internet. And I'm like, so that's what I'm saying is like, I never knew what it was like to start to be like a, like some kind of a monk, like digging through old, binder, old newspapers.
Well,
or whatever.
I got a couple years on you, and I mean, even in the 10 years older that I am, maybe I don't know, more than 10 years older than you, but that time span, things progressed.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, massively,
majorly,
yeah.
And I was on the tail end of the microfiche and going through things, but I did several of my papers that I was like, I pulled things from microfiche.
Well, I learned how to do it as well. I just had never had to really. I mean, whenever the microfilm stuff that I did when I was in college was like a project where you specifically had to use it to learn how to do it. Really, you know what I mean? Like it wasn't like I didn't have to.
Mine was a necessity because that's where the information.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
was.
I had never really had to. Usually, all the information I'd ever needed was like found in some book or another. I mean, even when I was in Scotland at the University of Edinburgh, and I had to write like these books, like a paper on the Crusades or whatever. There was, I'd have to use there's books we had to use that were like a couple hundred years old and stuff.
Yeah,
and we'd so that, but there was still a book. You know what I mean? It's like but there was only one copy that you had to like share with other people and stuff. But there was like but there's still a copy. So this was differently.
Don't spill your Starbucks on the 100-year-old book.
No, well, yeah, you couldn't even take it out of the library. You can only have it for like a couple hours. And you read specifically what you need to read, and then you got to turn it over to somebody else.
Yeah.
But I'd never been in a situation where like the story didn't exist in the common mind. You know what I mean? Right? There wasn't somebody else that had done the story that had sort of built the framework first. And I was just kind of rehashing a little bit, maybe add my own information to it. Like their story didn't exist. Like I actually had to identify what the parameters were, where, and I didn't even know what at the time, I didn't even know what the full story was. So I wrote the thesis. Even when I wrote the thesis, I really didn't come across the 30 championships. It was really focused on the 3 teams. And then a brief mention, that Joe Louis was part of it too.
Yeah.
because I just used primarily the Detroit News and Detroit Free Press.
Yeah.
It wasn't until I really started digging into the Detroit Times, a couple years after that when I got to the Detroit Times was like opening King Tut's tomb. I mean, it was like a whole world of stuff that the Detroit Times was the undisputed leader of this story, and people that don't use the Detroit Times for studying Detroit sports history, you're not going to find anything. It's not even a comparable. The Free Press and News used to cover the events. The Detroit Times, they were the undisputed leader of sports coverage in the 1930s. It is an indisputable fact. And they had an entire sports department. They had different people that were all constantly engaged with each other. Their stories are full of color. They have these like whimsical descriptions, and they talk to each other through articles. They have like a celebration of sports in their papers. And it was like a whole different world opened up. But when you say the whole like archaeology thing, you're not far from the truth, because like that's the way I felt when I released the first book. I felt like this is a project that had gone back to 2005, and I'm releasing this. I released the first book in early 2000, well actually late 2000. Man, I always forget. 2008 or 2009. I always forget.
The lines blur. All right,
maybe
whatever.
it was 2008 at the end
All
of
right.
2008. Because I came back in 2007 from Scotland, and then I took me a year. Maybe it was 2000. Maybe it was 2009. I don't even remember, man.
8 or 9.
8 or 9.
But I'm saying you
But
were like a
anyways-
total archaeologist unearthing.
That's what I'm
this
saying.
story.
But from 2005 till then, 3-4 years, whatever it was, during that time, like I had, it was an evolution. It was like 2 pages, then a 30-page paper, and then my first book. And so when I released this to the public, my view was I felt like I was an archaeologist. That was like I was publishing my discovery. I discovered this incredible thing, right? Well, we say it's a season, right? But imagine like somebody that discovered like King Tut or some major archaeological discovery that nobody'd ever heard of, and they turn it over to the newspapers because the job of the researcher and the archaeologist is to make the discovery and to identify what it is, to summarize it and to put it into a readable vehicle like a book or a research paper, for which is consumable for the media, for them to take it and do their jobs. And their job is to disseminate significant stories and significant discoveries, to disseminate that to the world. That's their job, right? That's their job. My job as the researcher and the writer is to identify. And that's the way I felt was. And so when I came, and I'd been reading the Free Press and News and following Detroit sports and events my entire life. When I worked up on Mackinac Island, every single day I read the Free Press and News. Every single day. And so I'm like, okay, here's the thing, right? I sent a copy.
Go unannounced?
I sent a copy of the book to every single writer at the News and Free Press. I sent like 60 copies of the book out, man. And I heard nothing back. Still to this day, I haven't had an article by the Free Press or News, man. So that's what I'm saying. Like
thank God you got somebody who created a podcast with you.
Well, that's but I'm just saying is that that's when it was like, that's what I mean. It's like, you're not wrong. I felt like an archaeologist, but I felt like somebody that was like, you come out with a story, you got a significant discovery, and you're like, and then you hear, over the course of time, you find out that it's because you're not part of some, clique or club. Who do you know? You didn't go. You go to University of Michigan. Did you go to were you in their such and such department or whatever? No, I wasn't, man. But I got a discovery. I know what I have. I know what I found. So anyways,
all right. What's this last part here?
There's the fifth guy of these 5.
He's got a little sub headline there, a little second.
He's got
deck.
a little segment. He's got his own little private little story.
Yeah. There's a little second deck. There's a little headline above it, right?
Yeah, it says
mini headline.
So his like sort of subheading is holds 2 skeet titles.
Okay.
And so it says so Bud Shaver continues. Last but not least among the marksman champions is Henry B. Joy Jr., who not only is national small bore skeet champion, but national 12-gauge champion as well, in addition to being a member of the All-American Skeet. If you are unacquainted with skeet shooting, I might add that it is an improved and exhilarating form of trap shooting, requiring much superior skill and coordination than the ordinary form of clay pigeon busting. If Mr. Holton will forgive us, we hasten to add that we are not entirely ignorant of Mr. Joy's shooting. We spent more than one afternoon at the Country Club of Detroit watching Mr. Joy demolish clay pigeons from the various stages of the skeet range. At that time, Mr. Joy was just a tyro in the business, and his shooting jacket was adorned with nothing except scuffed spots where his shotgun kicked him. Now, no doubt, he is gaudily attired with the bits and bunting which all skeet champions find time to sew on their shooting jackets. If Mr. Holton feels my silence on the matter of shooting champions was prompted from any lack of appreciation of the skill and nerve required, he is mistaken. The Army tried to make a marksman out of me, but finally gave up and made me a chore boy to a cook. I thus was spared gunshot wounds, but I suffered severe colic from my experiments with the cook's vanilla extract. Certainly, Mr. Holton, I appreciate cracked shots. I would have been one myself if it hadn't been for the vanilla extract.
There you are.
So he's talking about Henry B. Joy.
I love that. I love that a little bit, man. It's the homey touches in the writing.
Yeah.
We talked about that when we had Jer from the Daily Detroit on, and it was just the richness of the writing and the reporting. I just love these stories. And then we got him up on the screen there. We got Joy up on screen, and Chris
He's got his
checking
jackets too.
Chris checking in. So I wonder how things might have been different if the Detroit Times was still around today, right? What would Detroit media look like if the Times had stuck
Well,
around?
actually at one point I actually harbored dreams of resurrecting it. I thought it would be the greatest thing in the world to have a third option for a newspaper, especially when I was the early years. To call back to that we were just saying there, the early days were a really tough time for this project because I was like, it was like I just completely felt just totally let down by these newspapers and all them. And I was like in that sort of, anger, I guess you could say, that I used to have. I was like, I'm going to start my own damn newspaper and drive these idiots out of business, because if they're so dumb they can't see this story, what other stuff are they not covering,
Right.
And so anyways, I used to have I actually harbored like the dream of resurrecting the Detroit Times, in which the rights to it are currently owned by the Detroit News, by the way.
Oh, are they?
So the story, as I understand it, for the disappearance of the Detroit Times.
Oh, are they?
So I think it was 1968. You can look it up. Wikipedia has a date for its final date or whatever. I think it was 1968. Was their last year, 68 or 69. But from what I understand from the insider perspective, what happened is that the Detroit Times staff came in. Right, they came into the offices and it was like any other day, and they got to their desk and there was a letter on their desk that said the Detroit Times has folded and our circulation has been sold to the Detroit News. So basically, like So what the Detroit News bought was they bought the rights to the paper, but they the main thing they were after was their circulation lists, so that they could then sell, say, hey, we're going to sell you papers from the News now.
Dude, I was in radio for 17 years at 96.3, and I was another, 8 years, so I had a good 25 years in radio until just about a year and a half ago. But not that I'm angry or bitter, but it's like radio, the media and like radio, it's like a 4:00 meeting on a Friday.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want a 4:00 meeting on a Friday.
I don't know. I have no idea.
That is bad. Whatever country you're at, whatever station you're at, they're probably going to be playing country music next week.
Oh my God.
And everybody's looking for a job.
Oh my God.
It's those 4:00 Friday meetings. That totally reminds me of like a 4:00 Friday. It was I was at 96.3, and WDRQ was playing pop music, dance and pop music. Jay Towers was there, and they were rocking and rolling, and they had a 4:00 Friday meeting. Flipped to maybe Disney. I don't know. I don't know if they went to their country now. They might have went to Disney or Doug, and they fired everybody. They're like, all right, see ya. And it's just that thing. It's just summarily it's cold. The media is just like,
well, that's what happened to these guys.
Cold. That's why I teach high school. That's why I'm a teacher. It's because I love doing radio. I love doing that. But it's like, if you ever saw the movie Private Parts, Howard Stern.
Yeah.
Right. And the thing is, it's like 3 or 4 5 different times in the movie, he's like hooking a U-Haul trailer to the back of his car and moving someplace else, right? And going and going and going. Totally transient. I mean, that is totally.
Is it really?
That is totally radio. That is absolutely true, and that is totally radio. You get fired and you scramble and find a job. Doug Podell, right?
Yeah.
He's a good friend. He's been, he's here and he was like in Pennsylvania. He's in Minnesota, and he bounced, back and forth. He's been on like 6 different. He was doing weekends at 93.1 and at DVD. He was on at DVD like in between before he came back before Wheels had a resurgence and he got back on there. It's brutal. And I mean, somebody like Doug is like a media figure in Detroit.
Yeah.
And they just like, boop, nope, you're gone. And
well, from what I understood, there's a further element to the story, and the element was
the Times, yeah.
Well, at the
buying
time,
out the news, the news buying out the Times.
Yeah. Well, here's because here's the thing is when I went to go use when I wanted to when I was looking for photos to use for my books,
permissions, yeah.
Well, when I went to go use photos for the books, I was like, well, where am I going to get my photos? I knew nothing about like copyright or trademark stuff,
Sure,
right?
yeah.
So I like learned all that myself. I was like reading all the how to what the trademark rules was, whatever. And then, but I found out the story that the Detroit Times had bought up, the Detroit News had bought up the Times. And so that's when I was like, damn, the Detroit Times or the Detroit News has the rights for the Times. Because that was one of the reasons why I sort of fell into that story was like, I tracked down what happened to the Times.
Yeah.
And because I knew there was a ton of photos from the Times that I wanted to use because their photos, like their newspapers were so incredible. And so I reached out to the Detroit News for about how, getting permission for photos. And so the guy I talked to, he's like, hey, come to the archives or whatever. So I went to the archives room and to look at their photos, right, from 35. And dude, the kid comes out and the folder, it's like a manila folder.
Yeah.
And there's like 6 pictures in there. I'm like, what the hell? I'm like, well, you got anything from 34? They got a handful of and every picture in there was all the pictures you've seen in every book and every online picture. Anytime they have the 30s, there's like a picture of the Goose Goslin, Greenberg and Garinger, and they're like,
right.
These are the G-men from 35.
Yeah,
it's like, they're holding their bats up and they're like, it's the same canned photos I saw all over the place. But that was like their photo selection. I'm like, because they were like, well, it's going to be $250 to license a photo, from us. I'm like, well, I don't even want to use these anyways. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then I asked him, and this was the greatest coup of the entire project.
They're in public domain because they were too old, or?
They own the rights, but the thing about it was, I was talking to him, like, well, what about the Detroit Times photos? And that's when I heard the story. I don't know if it was him that told me or somebody else that told me, but I heard the story from like sort of the inside when they were telling me. I'm like, well, what happened? Because I went in there thinking that they're going to have a stack of Detroit Times photos because that's where the Times was sold to, right?
Sure, yeah.
But the story I was told was that on that last day, that the people that when they lost their jobs, I don't know if it was the photographers or who it was, but they went down to the archives and just wiped them out. They just took everything with them. Like they took all the photos. They took like, I don't know if it was photographers taking their own collections with them,
right?
Or if it was but it was the 60s, so it was like they couldn't still have. I mean, maybe there was a couple photographers there that had been there since the 30s, but it seems like you'd have like the next generation there. But whatever it was, I mean, they got cleaned out. I mean, there's not the Detroit Times like original like photos. And you can tell an original photo because it has the image of the photo, like the perfect 35 millimeter shot or whatever. It's like clean like glossy photo. And then on the back, there's a clipping. There's a newspaper clipping with that photo on it. You know what I mean? Like it's an actual grainy newspaper slice, and it has that photo. And there'll be a little byline tag that says like the date of when it was taken and that's glued to the back of the original.
Yeah.
So they say when that they, first used it. And so that photo, and it'll say like and they'll have a stamp with the photographer's name on it. So that's how you know that it's like an original.
Right.
And so those Detroit Times originally, and that's the other puzzling thing is the Detroit News didn't have anything in their archives, or maybe one or two from what I remember. It wasn't very much. And And then so you would think that there'd be a robust like online market for those photos where they're just like whoever brought them out, like, you know, they kept them in their house, and then the family members down the road would find the photos and then like put them on the internet for sale or whatever. You would think there'd be a fairly robust.
How much of that just ended up in the garbage?
That's what I'm trying to say. They basically vanished. You know,
they ended up in the garbage.
Yeah, so the photos are virtually non-existent, and what really dawned on me, which was almost mind blowing, was that there is a I looked actually into the actual production of the microfilm.
Yeah.
So there's a copy of the Detroit Times history at the Library of Lansing, and there's a full copy of the Detroit News at the Detroit Public Library.
So the actual papers
transferred onto microfilm.
Oh, on microfilm.
And then there's a company that has the original papers, or I don't know if they still have the papers, but they basically took the papers and converted it into a master reel of the Detroit Times, right? And that's so basically, like, if you want a copy of the Detroit Times, I forgot the name of the company, but it's I believe that's also in Ann Arbor. That's in Ann Arbor, and then I said it wrong. The master copy is in Ann Arbor at this company that converts newspapers into microfilm. Okay. They probably didn't keep the newspapers. I think that they may have sold it to a newspaper dealer. There's like a couple of newspaper dealers, like it's called like rarenewspapers.com and stuff like that.
Yeah.
They may have gotten some. I don't know exactly, but I know that there's a master copy of the microfilm at a company in Ann Arbor. There's another copy of the Detroit Times at the Library of Lansing, right? Like the Capitol.
But these are microfilms.
Microfilm copies. And then there's a copy of the Detroit Public Library. So what I'm saying is there's only 3 copies of the Detroit Times in existence. That's it. If anything were to happen to the Detroit Times microfilms in any or all 3 of those locations, the entire history of the Detroit Times would be completely lost. Yeah. Unless they've transferred it in the last 10 years onto the internet, into like a
digital
format, then maybe. But that'd been yes. Well,
you
hopefully
think they think that you would think they would.
But I mean, it takes time and effort to do all that, But what I'm saying though is that there was a point where that dawned on me, and I'm like, holy cow, man! Like this newspaper, I have so much respect for these writers, and their entire history would literally vanish if something bad happened. If something happened to all 3 of those reels, or even if they just got worn out from people, every once in a while going through them, so that's what I'm saying. And and the thing is, I also noticed too is that, when you're going through the microfilm, there might be a page that's like copied wrong, so it's like folded. Yeah. And there's an article that's like folded over. Yeah. And so you'll never read that article. You know what I mean? So I'm like, damn,
it's gone.
It's literally gone. It's literally been erased. So it's kind of
it's interesting.
History's fragile,
and again, it's
man.
that history. Yeah. And it's
history's
fragile. If we don't study it, we're doomed to repeat it.
Well, you're doomed to not be able to learn from its lessons to improve yourself and everything. So that's what I mean. So anyways.
Well, what else do we know about Henry Joy?
Yeah, so I found so there's not a ton online, but here's the thing is that whenever I was out in Grosse Pointe, and like basically it was really strange because whenever I was on the road, I always had my city. I have 3 copies of the City of Champions newspaper. Yeah. So one copy I have is in a frame, and it's on my wall in my apartment, right? And then I have another copy that's my traveling copy. That's the copy I'm going to bring with us when we go to the Historical Museum for Champions Day. So I have a traveling copy, and then I have a mint condition copy, which is like the greatest thing I've ever bought in my life. Yeah. Like totally mint condition and everything. And so, anyways, with my traveling copy, whenever I'm doing art shows or whatever events, there's 2 things that people gravitate towards. It's the Tigers and it's Joe Louis. Right. Those are the 2 things that people go, oh my God, is that the Tigers? Yeah. Or oh my God, that's Joe Louis. Those are the 2 things. But the strangest thing is that when I'm in Grosse Pointe, I've done many, many shows in Grosse Pointe, and it's Henry B. Joy. They gravitate towards, not every person, of course, but but that's the primary spot that people go, oh, Henry B. Joy. They're like, that's Henry Joy. Like they gravitate towards him. Right. And so like when you're in,
Well, but it's old families, established
Exactly.
families.
We're
and
going to find out why.
Yeah.
He's heavily attached to Grosse Pointe, and it's interesting that his name, I think he had a great deal to do with the Grosse Pointe War Memorial.
Oh, okay.
Which, if you've never been there, have you been there?
I've DJ'd
several
weddings there.
It's a cool place.
Yeah,
it's a very, very cool place.
Yeah.
And I've done many art shows there, and it's a very, very cool place. And that place, that war memorial, is that's the number one place that I used to hear. They'd be like, "Oh, Henry B. Joy, you used to do stuff here at this Grosse Pointe War Memorial."
Okay.
So that's why they have their sort of connection with him is, it's interesting that he gets sort of brought up there. So really, there was I picked up a lot of anecdotal stories about him when I was in Grosse Pointe. But I like this. This is his obituary.
Oh, okay.
It came out it was Detroit Free Press. March 23rd, 1976.
Oh.
And this is just a nice little overall definitive. It's got the years. There's no anecdotal anything. So we're gonna spit this out, okay? So it says funeral services for Henry Bourne Joy Jr., son of the man who brought the Packard Motor Company to Detroit in 1903, will be at 11 a.m. Wednesday at the Grosse Pointe Memorial Church, Lakeshore Drive, Grosse Pointe Farms. Mr. Joy, 64, died Sunday of a chronic heart ailment. The son of Henry Bourne Joy, one of Detroit's early automotive pioneers, and the grandson of James F. Joy, pioneering railroad attorney and one of the men behind the first Sault Ste. Marie locks, Henry Joy Jr. spent much of his life at elegant leisure. Tall and still rakish with a full head of gray hair, he was known as a sportsman, boatsman, real estate investor, and raconteur. In the late 1930s, he gained recognition as a championship skeet shooter, winning several national and world titles at that sport. Though he inherited vast wealth through his father and grandfather, Mr. Joy was known also for his simplicity and for his lack of exclusive pretensions. One of his trademarks was tying his glasses to his coat with an old fly fishing line. He was still a handsome, impressive guy, said one close associate, but he was plain as a shoe in a lot of ways. I remember back in the 50s, he used to keep some motor yachts in Florida, but he used to wear plain old beat up khakis all over the boat. A lot of other yacht captains kept mistaking him as a member of the crew. Henry Bourne Joy Jr. traced his American heritage back to 1657, when Thomas Joy, as architect and builder, came to the colonies from England. The senior Henry Joy inherited substantial wealth from his railroad attorney father and went on to increase the family fortune through investment in the embryonic automobile industry. He negotiated for the purchase of the Ohio Automobile Company, renamed it the Packard Motor Company, and set up a shop on East Grand Boulevard. The operation became one of the nation's largest automobile manufacturers before its collapse in 1956. Henry B. Joy Sr. married Helen Hall Newberry, thus joining two of the most prominent Grosse Pointe families. Mrs. Joy, who died in 1958 at the age of 88, was for many years the grand dame of Detroit Grosse Pointe society. Henry Jr., their only son, was born April 8th, 1910. He was educated at Detroit University, Andover, Mass., Roxbury School, Phillips Academy, and for a brief time at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. In 1931, he went to work as an executive with Joy Realty Company, now known as H.B. Joy Company of the Penobscot Building, where he managed the family's vast real estate holdings and philanthropic enterprises until his death. On June 3, 1933, he married Betty Wood Williams, the daughter of a prominent Detroit family. She died in 1973 after a long illness. It was in the years immediately after his marriage that he became known as a sportsman about the town, competing and participating in ice boating, power boating, hunting, sport shooting, and automobile touring. He was a member of the Glidden Automobile Tour Club, and at his death, he had 4 meticulously maintained Packards representing different eras in the Packard Corporation history. He kept them parked in the garage of his Grosse Pointe Farms home on Provincial Road. He also maintained a 4,000-acre ranch in Montmorency County, as well as one of the original cottages built out over the Lake St. Clair on the St. Clair Flats in an exclusive Harson's Island domain known as the Old Club. So during World War II, he served as a lieutenant in the Army Air Corps. He was an instructor in gunnery and flight school at Panama City, Florida. After the war, he returned to his business and a long series of philanthropic and club activities. He was a member of almost all of the most prestigious Detroit area clubs, including the Detroit Athletic Club, the Country Club of Detroit, the Old Club, the Grosse Pointe Club, Detroit Historical Society, Detroit Zoological Society, and the exclusive Yonda Tega Club. He is survived by one son, Henry born Joy III of Grosse Pointe, who works in the family investment company, and a sister, Helen born Joe Lee of Winter Haven, Florida. Says his body will be at the William Hamilton Company, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
Yep. So
Movers and shakers over on the
that's what I'm saying.
east side.
This is top society in
Yeah.
Detroit.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
I just
yeah.
like it because it kind of mentions what an elite, member of society. Like, these are all the clubs he was part of.
Oh, yeah.
These are all the things he did. They united two of the most prominent families in Grosse Pointe.
Yeah.
It's our own sort of Detroit version of aristocracy, I guess you could say.
Well, that's cool. That was Champions 6 through 10.
Yeah,
Yes?
so that's 5 of them right there. You got to kind of cover them all together.
That's good stuff, man.
Yeah, so the Detroit Police, and we got Henry B. Joy. So again, we'll just go back to the roster of champions in the same scenario that we've been using at the end of these episodes, which is so here you go. Any city that ever wants to lay claim to the greatest season in the history of American sport, you got to match the Tigers, Lions, Red Wings first championships. You got to match those teams. Okay, you're gonna bring your 3 major teams to the table. Then you got to find a boxer that can face off against Joe Louis, right? They he didn't win his championship, but at the same time is our man that we're tabbing to lead the charge for this year, right? And then you got to have a speedboat racer who's going to compete against Garwood. You've got to have a minor league hockey team. So not only do you have to have a major league hockey championship, but you have to have a minor league hockey championship at the highest level to face off against the Detroit Olympics. Then you got to find a golfer who can battle against Walter Hagen in a freaking match tournament, right?
Yeah.
In a match tournament against Walter Hagen.
Yeah.
And then after that, you got to find a sprinter that can outrun Eddie Tolan, right? And then you got to find somebody that can throw a weight or a caber toss or whatever. I'm sure Clark Haskins will let you pick your event.
Yeah.
So you got to find a weight thrower who's going to outthrow Clark Haskins. And then after that, if you've found a city that can match all of those things, okay, all those skills and champions and all that, you're able to get to that point. Now you got to bring your sharpshooters out. Right, and so now you got to bring is you not only do you have to have your 3 individuals to place off against 3 individual police shooting champions and face them off and win individual championships against these guys, but you also have to win the overall team championship with all of them together. And then so after you've done that, now you've got to find a skeet shooter that can because here's the thing, Henry B. Joy is in this national skeet shooting. What is it? What's the proper terminology? He is in the National Skeet Shooting Association Hall of Fame.
Gee,
okay.
Crickets.
Yeah. So you got to find a guy who can match up against Henry B. Joy, who is a national skeet shooting champion and skeet shooting Hall of Fame member.
Impossible.
Oh, we forgot Dick Degener. What about the diver? You got to find a diver who can beat Dick Degener, who is one of the elite diving champions of his era, if not the elite. So you got to find somebody that can dive better than Dick Degener, right? So
all from one city, all in one year.
Yeah, all from the same.
Good luck, Chuck.
Yes, good luck. So that's what I'm saying. So when I say this is the greatest season that ever has happened, and this is the greatest season that ever will happen, people are like, whoa, what? Can you see the future? It's like, no, but it'd be impossible.
Impossible.
It's impossible, and we're not even done. We're not even through. We got
on
tennis players, and so the next week we're gonna be talking about tennis and badminton and all this other stuff.
We're on our way to championships ourselves.
Wait till we get to the Stroh's bowling team, dude.
Oh my gosh.
It's the greatest bowling team.
We're gonna have to bring in like
time.
a 6-pack of Stroh's for that. But we're on our way to our own little championship. I sent you a link. Just wanted to say thanks to you for listening. Really appreciate it because everybody that listens, and it pushed us into the one of the 40 best podcasts.
Oh yeah,
in Detroit.
Yeah, that's what we're talking about. Yeah.
And we came in, and they're ranked. I mean, these are ranked, and out of the 40 best podcasts in Detroit, we come in at number 13.
Heck yeah!
And there's like some other podcasts that are like below us.
Good shows, man.
I'm like, wow, we're better than that. Okay,
yeah, we're really appreciative of that. We're appreciative of that ranking, man.
So according to FeedSpot, and the number 3 podcast is our friend Jer over at the Daily Detroit, and he posted it and brought it to my attention.
Heck
and
yeah,
I shared
dude.
it with you. So
We gotta get some shirts made that say we're number 13.
So it's based on web and the rankings and traffic and social media followers and freshness.
Heck yeah.
So it pulls in all these different things. So it's not just
We got to get some shirts though, bro. It
Yep.
says
We're number
13.
we're number 13.
We're number 13.
So yeah, that was kind of
We
happy.
get a hat made that says
That's
I'm number 13.
happy little news there.
Heck
So
yeah.
I
was happy about it. I was like, damn, that's awesome, man. I'll take number 13.
yeah.
And climbing higher. We're climbing up there.
So anyhow, so thanks for putting us in that list because you listen.
Yeah, it brought a smile to my
thank-
face. It's,
thank you for
it's,
listening.
We've spent a lot of time on this, so we appreciate. It's nice to have a little bit of recognition, a bit.
We appreciate it.
This is where we're giving our speeches.
No, that's it.
I want to thank you guys. You really love us. You really love us. Thank you so much.
Like, subscribe, leave a comment. All the podcast things and all the podcast places. We'll be back to do it again very, very soon. It's Detroit, City of Champions. We're out.
We're out.